Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel, and welcome to a very cool tournament that's going on now these days. It's of course the chess.com Speed Chess Championship, and this will be, I think, the top event in this month as Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen are participating. And this is a bracket system, so it's a knockout stage with 16 really top grandmasters, and the bracket is set up like this: that Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen can only meet in the finals, so they cannot play against each other in an early stage of the tournament. So it will be, I think, really a dynamic tournament. Alireza Firouzja is here, Fabiano Caruana is here, Nihal Sarin is here, Maxime Vachier, Lagrave, really the elite top grandmasters now these days, and they're playing also some great Blitz bullet games, so they're also very popular by streaming, and this was of course a great event for us. At least in the next 2 weeks we'll have something to watch, because again, no over-the-board tournaments are played. So today we're starting as a warm-up with a great match between Maxime Vachier, Lagrave and Nihal Sarin. Nihal Sarin, the chess prodigy, really a part of this India new wave in chess. It's really incredible how many great and talented players India has now. He faces now a great player, Maxime Vachier, Lagrave, especially in this faster time formats. Maxime performs really in such a great shape. So as I said, it will be really an interesting tournament, and most of us maybe think that the finals will be, of course, Magnus Carlsen against Hikaru, but we'll see. We'll come to that point in the later stage of the tournament, because still Maxime is really incredible. Also, Alireza has proved himself recently. It's really, I'm not predicting anything because I'm really bad in predicting. So I wanted to show you now a game between Maxime and Nihal Sarin. It was really a dynamic match game. The setup is like this. First, they have to play 10 Blitz games 5+1, then 10 Blitz games 3+1, and then 10 bullet games 1+1. So 30 games, really incredible format. It's not that we're used to this format, but it's really, I think, a cool format because they're playing so fast, they're playing so attractive, and I wanted to show really an attractive game in which here Maxime Vachier, Lagrave played with the white pieces, and at the end of the video I'm going to reveal you also the result of the match game. So let's check out now the game. Here Maxime opened with the move e4, Nihal played c6, knight to f3, and we have here d5. So we have the caro-kann, and after knight to c3 we have the two knights variation. Here Nihal takes d takes e4, knight to e4, and now knight to f6. And this setup has been played many times. I've watched also a little bit live the match game between Nihal and Maxime Vachier, Lagrave. Nihal had really troubles against this setup. It's really a normal idea because we want to bring first our knights out, which is the common idea in chess. And here queen to e2, played by Maxime Vachier, Lagrave, simply developing his queen with ideas to play d3, bishop to g5, maybe even g3, bishop to g2, and then you have sort of the flexibility. We're waiting where is black going to prepare to castle, and then we can castle on the opposite side. And as white, we have always this advantage, especially when you play as white, you have always this advantage that you're basically one plus, that you have a 1+ tempo, and then you can really attack. So bishop to f5, we have knight takes f6, g takes f6, and now d3, played by Maxime, knight to d7, and now g3. We have e6, bishop to g2, so still common theory of this caro-kann line, and now queen to c7, and now castling. Okay. Here Nihal Sarin castles queenside, and of course when we have this kings on the opposite side, it cannot be really a boring game. Now the main idea is of course to create a fast attack. From white perspective, we want of course to attack the queen side. From black perspective, we want to attack the king side with potential h5, h4 moves and similar stuff. So here rook to b1, played by Maxime. A more accurate way is to play knight to h4, then you're forcing your opponent to play the move bishop to g6 if you don't want to risk some triple pawns on the f-file. So, and this move knight to h4, I think gives white such a pleasant game, because then black will have troubles to maintain the attack with the potential h5 move, because then you risk some knight takes g6 followed with queen to e6 moves. And this move Maxime Vachier, Lagrave missed in the beginning. It's not the point that Maxime is worse here after the move rook to b1, but this is really an accurate way to proceed here. After the move bishop to g6, h5 is simply too slow. You will have to maybe protect even your e-pawn, and then white has has an extra tempo and it can attack faster, I think, here on the queen side. So h5, you see Nihal uses now the moment immediately. We have b4, really a dynamic game already, knight to b6, and now b5, simply trying to split the pawn structure in front of the king. We want to open files, open diagonals in front of black's king. Black wants to do that, of course, on the king side. In the game, c5 was played, and now comes this idea, knight to h4, and in the game you see Nihal has to retreat with the bishop to h7. If you retreat again to g6, then knight takes g6, queen takes e6. So here bishop to h7, and now you see the h5 pawn is hanging. A very interesting idea happens if you try, for instance, the move a4. So if you sacrifice the pawn, if knight takes a4 here happens, then we can simply play rook to a1. And in this opposite side attack games, you want to sometimes even sacrifice some pawns just in order to be faster on that side where you're attacking. So it's a very, very interesting. After knight to c3, we could try something like queen to f3 and maybe really create a dynamic position. You see with the bishop aiming here against the weak b7 pawn, with the rook aiming here against the pawn on a7. It's already a very, very risky position here for black. But in the game, Maxime played a very, very aggressive move, queen takes h5, accepts the challenge. Okay, he took a pawn. The main idea when you take a pawn in a match, in a chess game, is of course to simplify the position. We want then maybe to trade off more pieces, because there are now of course some tactical threats on the h file. The h file is opened here. This rook can also maybe in some occasions come to the g file. So black has accomplished basically what he wanted to do. He wanted to open files and really directly attack the king. Although white is much, much better, but this was a 1+1 game, and in this time formats you can really make mistakes, so there were many blunders, many inaccuracies, but I think it was a really cool game because Maxime Vachier Lagrave basically invited Nihal Sarin to get into the attack. So we have bishop to d6. You see Nihal develops the dark square bishop on a very, very active diagonal. Now with these rooks there could be also some trouble. So queen to e2, you have to retreat. There are also some tactical threats, discover attacks on the queen if the queen stays on the h file. Knight to d5, and now bishop to d2. We have bishop to e5, and now comes the move, of course, a4. We want to play a5, even b6, a6, just to split the pawn structure in front of the king and really create some dynamics. Here, rook from d to g8. As I said, black proceeds with the idea, but the problem is now I still think that black's progress is much, much more slower, because here knight to c3 maybe is better to get rid of at least this bishop pair. Bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, and now maybe b6 can happen. As I said, we can sacrifice a pawn after a takes b6. Maybe rook to b5 is here an option for white. But at least I think you have the bishop pair, you can make something happen. Here, rook from d to g8 in this particular mover, it's simply now a weakness, because you have left really the defense of your king. And this moment here, Maxime Vachier Lagrave immediately uses now with really direct ideas to play the move b6. You could also try bishop to d5, and after e takes d5 immediately b6. It's a little bit faster, but after a takes b6 and maybe a5, here we can simply take and maybe go into a simplified line, trying to get this bishop somehow into the game. Maybe this is defendable, still an equal game it is, but as I said, in the game I think Maxime played really the accurate move a5, now with the threat to really create some dynamics with the b6 pawn breakthrough. So that's why Nihal Sarin gets out of the range of the potential b6 move, because when b6 now happens, then we can play a6. If now, for instance, a6 happens, then we can pass through with the move b6. That's this so-called parallel setup. As a defensive strategy, we're using this parallel setup. Whenever white moves the pawn, then we want to pass through. We're not allowing some open files here. In the game, knight to f3, played by Maxime Vachier Lagrave, getting another defender in front of the king. Here, bishop to c3 was played, and now comes a6. After b6, okay, we cannot really open the b file now, but the main problem is now the weak b7 square, and also the c6 is a long-term weakness. So there are now really weaknesses in front of the king. The king is really endangered, and I think Nihal Sarin found here really not a good strategy. He should have, I think, maybe tried to get his pieces back, try to defend first his position with the king, and then maybe strike back with some counterattacks in the game. Knight to h4, played again by Maxime Vachier Lagrave. We have bishop to d2, queen to d2, and now knight to c7, attacking the knight, and now bishop to c6, attacking the queen, queen to d4. Okay, let's stop and evaluate the position. This is now really a dynamic game. As I said, we have really some great tactical threats for both sides, and the main, as I said, idea for white here is to simplify the position. You go into a simplified variation, trade off more pieces, really try to go into a favorable endgame, because in the beginning Maxime Vachier Lagrave took the pawn on h5, and it's simple as that. So that's basically our main strategy now from white's perspective. In the game knight to f3, you have to retreat with your knight, because there is also this tactical threat, queen takes h4, knight to f3, queen to g4, and now rook to e1. We have bishop to f5. Nihal really finds now the best squares for his pieces. There are now also several light square problems that that white has to protect. Queen to e2, queen to h3, and now queen to f1. If you trade, for instance, here the queens, it's not such a good idea, because, as I said, black can only win this game, I think, with some great tactics, maybe with some checkmate threats, with some dynamics. If you trade off the queens, okay, king to f1, you can maybe play e5 or bishop to h3. It's not a problem. King to g1. Then the position is more and more simplified, and you want to keep your queens on the board in order to make something happen. Here, I think without the queens, black is really lost. We can now really force a trades of pieces, maybe maneuver the knight somewhere, playing bishop to g2, then maybe knight to e5, knight to e4, regroup a little bit, and then go simply into a favorable endgame. So that's why trading off the queens is not an option here for black. Black has to play for a win now. Queen to h5, we have queen to g2, and now bishop to h3 and queen to h1, played by Maxime, simply retreating with the queen, where the queen is of course also protecting the h2, but also the weak square g2. So bishop to g4, we have knight to d2, and now knight to d5. And here comes really a great move by Maxime Vachier Lagrave, which is a really risky choice if you think about it more. Bishop takes d5. Giving up the light square bishop with such light square problems in front of the king is really a risky idea. Again, if you play queen takes d5, we can play queen takes d5, e takes d5, and now rook to e7 is here the tactical threat. For instance, if you try bishop to d7 to retreat, then c4, I think, wins the game here for white. Here you can maybe pass through with the pawn on d4, but now knight to e4 really wins the game with an attack on the weak f6 pawn, but also with the tactical threat with this check knight to d6. So we can also get this rook into the game, double up rooks here on the e file, and again it's a completely lost game here for black. So after the move bishop to d5, that's why, as I said, e takes d5, we want to stay with the queens on the board. Trading off the queens for black is not an option. Here c4, if you take, you risk really again this tactical threats here on b7. So that's why rook to d8, and now rook to e7. What you do here from black perspective, in the game queen to g5 was played, maybe rook to d7, simplifying the position as much as you can, because this is really a risky position. In the game queen to g5, attacking the knight, and now comes really the critical moment of the game. f4 played by Maxime Vachier Lagrave, which isn't such a mistake, but the better idea is simply to take c takes d5. If you try rook to d5, then it's of course here rook takes a7, with also some threats, rook to a8, and grabbing this rook. For instance, if you try here queen to d2, it's not an option, because you get d6 and you cannot protect everything. If you try, for instance, rook to d7 to cover your 7th rank, then you get a checkmate on a8. So if you try to trade off the queens, queen to d5, again rook takes d5, and again this idea rook to a7. So really here I think Maxime missed really the best move. He played the move f4, and this move although the evaluation is still good for white, it weakens a little bit the dark squares here in front of the king, and this will play now a very important role in the continuation of the game, as of course Nihal Sarin played queen to f5, we have queen to g2, and now queen takes d3. And what to do here in the game now, Maxime played really a huge blunder. He took the pawn on a7. This is a problem because you're leaving your e3 pawn, but in the game Nihal tried bishop to e2, which was now a mistake, which is again winning here for white. And after the move queen to e3, this game is simply to resign here for white, because there's nothing you can do. If you try to cover with the queen, we can simply take, and now this rook comes very active into the game. If you try to protect, then this rook will create another check. This bishop can come into the game. For instance, if you try here not to cover, if you try for maybe something like king to h1, then bishop to h3, after queen to f3, we can simply take out now. This knight on d2, a check doesn't bring you so much. Rook to a8 will simply play here rook king to c7, and we're escaping here in this position. If you try for instance to retreat after queen to e3, if you try king to f1, then again you get checkmated, not checkmated, pardon me, it's of course losing position for white, as we have this move again, bishop to h3, and you lose the queen. So really messed up position. But in the game Nihal played really a huge blunder again. So it was first the blunder by Maxime, then a blunder by Nihal here, then finally Maxime Vachier realized his problems, that he has now to cover his weak e3 square in the game, rook to e8 attacking, but now a7 simply wins the game. The evaluation is simply winning here for white. In the game rook takes e7, now we can promote to another queen, here king to c7, now another check, we can take out this pawn, here another check, and after rook to c7, here again a check, and queen takes d5. In this position Nihal resigned, so you have to trade off the queens, and this is simply too much material on the white side, and it's of course a completely winning endgame here for white. So okay, it wasn't maybe really the most accurate of games, but I think it was a really cool game. And as I said, Nihal had really the troubles against this two knights variation of the caro-kann. Maxime Vachier wins now the match game and moves up to the quarterfinals of this very nice tournament. And today we see also the world champion Magnus Carlsen playing in this very nice event. This will be, I think, great 2 weeks for us to watch, and I'm really looking forward to cover this tournament, as I think we'll have really some great games. And you see 30 games, we can really watch 30 games by, for instance, Magnus Carlsen. We can watch 30 games played by Hikaru Nakamura, and of course follow really this chess.com live coverage. They are really great. I spent most of my day watching simply the match game between Maxime and Nihal Sarin. So okay, this was a warm-up. I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot, although it had really some inaccuracies and blunders. I'll create now a new playlist of this tournament, so you can follow my coverage of this very nice event. If you want to see some other tournaments that I've covered, here are also the links of my previous analyzed tournaments. And if you want to see maybe the best chess games of all times, check out my best chess games of all time series. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.